morning. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time. I will briefly introduce myself to all of you. My name is Laura Tzanev. I am the co-founder and head of the AI Strategy Institute Academy. My first touch point basically with the whole IT world started when I was working for Microsoft in Vienna, and I was in an advisory role, and yeah, seeing many different kind of industries and projects, and yeah, AI was already on the rise, I'd say, not as big as it's now, but yeah, many interesting developments definitely in this field. And after quite some years, I decided to go more in the educational direction, and now I'm mainly teaching at schools, high schools, even primary schools, and universities for all kind of technology topics, starting with, yeah, like basic things, I would say the internet, smartphone, social media, and then going more into the deep water with AI and all these kind of topics. Yeah. So that's how I got here now. And also that was how I met on the way Tristan, my dear friend now. And yeah, Tristan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, very happy to shortly introduce myself. So my name is Tristan, a little bit maybe how I got into the field of artificial intelligence. So it came through my passion in education and teaching. I was teaching quite a lot at the London School of Economics. And back then I was teaching a course in statistics or econometrics. It was 2018, 19. And then really machine learning became a buzzword, and I was more interested into it, wanted to know more because my students kept asking. So I took up a course in applied data science, and at the same time, I started a research position for a former professor who was writing a book on kind of like the impact of AI on our economy and society. And during this time, I realized a couple of things. First of all, I realized I'm not a good coder. Then I also realized that AI is going to be a big topic sooner or later, and that most of the challenges are going to be not on the technical side, but on the strategic and management side. So then I decided not to do a PhD, but actually to gain experience in the real world. So the first experience, because back then there were no roles as AI strategist, but I joined very early on a very successful startup called Deep Sea AI in radiology, and I was the first person. So I think I was hire number 6 or 7 on the business side, and I helped them kind of like to build up their business side. Later, when Corona hit, there was less to do with customers. I became more of an AI product manager. And then after 1.5 years, I switched more because I wanted to even work more closely on the technology. Went to Unternehmertum, the largest entrepreneurship center in Europe, and joined there kind of like a division applied AI. Worked there as an AI strategist, helping organizations to understand AI, but also to build up successful AI strategies. And I stayed there for 1.5 years. Then I was poached by kind of like the Schwarz Foundation or by Campus Founders. That's the entrepreneurship hub in Heilbronn, where they're building up this big, massive ecosystem for artificial intelligence. And there I was responsible to building up kind of like the AI startup incubator. And we were actually able to manage to build it up in kind of like a super short range to one of the largest AI startup incubators in Europe. I did this for 1.5 years, but my passion has always been in teaching, in education. So I always taught on the side, and I have a course at the Technical University of Munich, which I started before ChatGPT started with 40 students. And it's not so much about how to build AI, but really kind of like how to understand how to manage AI, and also how to build successful AI strategies. And the course really exploded. So in the first year, I had 40 students. A lot of them said it was like one of the favorite courses they had. And in the next year, I had over 1,000 students. Just yesterday, I taught the third kind of like the third time that I'm teaching the course. Yesterday, we had our kickoff with over 700 students. The last time we kicked it off, we had 600. So I see it's still growing the course. So very, very exciting. And yeah, I always kind of like always through kind of like this worked as a freelancer, did a lot of kind of like thought leadership. So, for instance, I spoke in a parliament about how to build successful strategies for an economy when it comes to AI. But I did do also a lot of upskilling. So I'm a faculty member for the Boston Consulting Group, where I help them to upskill their people when it comes to AI and kind of like the management side of AI. I work, for instance, with the military, but also do quite a lot of workshops with C-level or workers' council, big organizations, but also small ones. And then also what I do is more strategy work, where I write kind of like strategies. I supported there kind of like, for instance, the city of Munich. I helped the government of, I think, Nigeria to help them in initial talks to set up kind of like a plan how they could set up an AI strategy. But also here with the Bavarian AI agency, I helped them kind of like to develop a strategic roadmap to approach SMEs. And this led me kind of like where I met Laura in one of those workshops, and we kind of like kept talking. And I mean, I had the idea for building up this AI Strategy Institute already for a couple of years, but never really kind of like the time and found the right person. And then we met and we said, okay, well, let's build something together. And this is what is the AI Strategy Institute. But now I think I have talked already extensively about myself. And what I would like to do now is maybe kind of like present you a little bit with the framework when it comes to AI strategy that we're using in the AI Strategy Institute that I have been kind of like developing over the years, refining over the years, and what I think is kind of like a very holistic view when it comes to how should I tackle AI strategy. And afterwards, Laura and I are going to go a little bit more into kind of like a discussion if kind of like this framework for AI strategy is suitable for everyone or how we can think about this. So let me share my screen in a second, and then we will get into the cool stuff. So I hope you can see my screen. So perfectly. So when we're talking about, or when I kind of like approach an organization, when we come to talking about AI strategy and setting up an AI strategy, there's kind of like a three-step approach I normally take. So first of all is kind of like what I call the fundamentals. So often I come in very early in an organization and we have to understand kind of like the basic fundamentals. Not so much kind of like how AI works. Obviously, this is important, but the main challenge that we're seeing at the moment is that everyone talking about artificial intelligence and generative AI, a lot of kind of like trying those things out. But a lot of those organizations really struggle in kind of like generating a sustainable return on investment. And there was a fun quote I read today that Gen AI is a little bit like teenage sex. Everyone talks about it. Everyone pretends he or she has done it, but no one actually has done it, and no one is kind of like able to pull it off. And it seems a little bit really like this. So what I try to do when I come into an organization is kind of like try to get the people together and working on the fundamentals, kind of like the understanding how AI, not only what it can do, but how AI actually can deliver value for organizations, whether I apply AI into my products or into or services or into kind of like my processes, and we differentiate between different processes, and kind of like this helps us to think about where we can apply AI, and also kind of like how we can think about either applying AI to increase my revenues, because at the end of the day we want to have kind of like an impact on the P&L, or do I apply it more in my processes where AI can help me much more to kind of like reduce cost, but also helps me to increase the quality of the services and the products that I'm having. Because for instance, now with AI, I can deliver a service much, much faster than I could do before, or I have less kind of like management touch points involved. And this allows me to do so at a lower overhead and at a lower cost, for instance. And this kind of like how we think about it. And with this AI fundamentals, with an understanding of AI, what it can do for the organizations, then we're working together kind of like into crafting a vision for the organization where it might stand in the next 2, 3, 4 years as an AI-enabled organization. And then from this vision, kind of like this allows us then to break down kind of like a strategy. In order to formulate a vision, I normally try to understand a couple of things and work with the people. So I try to understand where, for instance, So what is this actually what you're doing? What is kind of like your competitive advantage? Why you're making money? And also to understand what are your business goals. Because at the end of the day, AI is a tool and it should support your goals and your overall strategy. So to say kind of like an AI strategy sits somewhere in the overall corporate strategy, right? And then also thinking about, well, what do my customers expect? For instance, if my customers kind of like are now used to have kind of like 24/7 service available because of AI and chatbots, then this might be something I have to include as an organization as well to keep pace or to keep pace with the market. And also I need to think about, okay, well, how is the whole market, but also where are my competitors evolving? So how is everything evolving? And the last part is to think, okay, well, how is the whole industry evolving? But not only the whole industry, a lot of people, but also the technology, because a lot of people make the mistakes and I think, okay, well, we are standing here and how can we integrate or what do I have to do to integrate current AI technology into my business? But actually, what is important to understand is we're talking about a vision of 3 to 5 years. So just imagine where the technology is going to be in the future, in the next kind of like 3 to 5 years. And just think about how the technology has been progressing over the time. So I really try to force the people to think about, okay, well, where is this going to be? What can I do with AI in this future where I have the vision of my AI-enabled organization? And you will see that a lot of the use cases that might be now very challenging or even impossible will become possible along the way. And this means for me, I don't want to start once they are available, but I want to start as early as possible to really set up kind of like the important things that we have been doing. So then if we have kind of like the vision, this helps us to set the strategy. And the strategy is composed of two parts. The first part is thinking kind of like the daily bread, the AI use cases. Obviously, we need to apply somewhere AI into the organization, otherwise we're not doing AI. And then, and this is going to be a majority, especially for bigger organizations, thinking about the enabling factors, so the transformation of the organization towards an organization that's actually able to do artificial intelligence. And I want to deep dive in those two topics just right now. So let's first focus on kind of like the use cases that I have. So how do I go on kind of like to look at use cases? And the first part that you normally do is kind of like have this ideation of all kind of use cases along your value chain. And the first part is just kind of like just get people together, brainstorm, look at the processes you have that often can help kind of like use design thinking and so on to come up with ideas for use cases along the value chain. And then as part of the second step of the ideation, we should start to evaluate those use cases. And basically on two axes or 2 points is kind of like what is the overall value of this use case. So there are two values. There's obviously the economic value. At the end of the day, we want to understand what is kind of like the impact on the P&L, but also strategic value. Because there might be some use cases that you say, okay, well, they don't have the biggest economic value, but I have a team of experts and I want them to work on this use case to gain experience what it means to work with a new technology, how to implement, for instance, an API of these large language models and so on. And then it can also make sense kind of like to prioritize some use cases that might not have the biggest return on investment or kind of like economically impact, but you're going to learn a lot that is going to be helpful all over the roadmap. Because at the end of the day, we're not looking at isolated use cases, but we have to look at the whole range and the whole scale of use cases that we're working on. So then kind of like once we have kind of like on the one hand side the obviously the overall value, on the other hand side we're looking at the cost. And then this it depends a little bit if you're gonna buy a use case from the market, then it's really kind of like what is the cost, what is the purchasing cost, what is the manufacturing cost, the maintenance cost, and also looking a little bit what is the risk. So what risk could happen if the use case doesn't perform as I want. And then for organizations that are less focused on a buy strategy, but more on kind of like making their own use cases, it's more kind of like what is the ease and the cost of implementation. So it's not so this is something slightly different. And then once you have kind of like evaluated those use cases, what we would normally do is kind of like to rank those use cases and then prioritize the top use cases. And once the top use cases are prioritized, we can go deeper and we go into these 3, 4, 5 top use cases. And what we're trying to do with kind of like the use case design is really kind of like to validate those use cases, thinking about how does a use case look like? What are the kind of like the steps that I have to take in order for a use case to be successful? And a use case to be successful is not the performance of the AI algorithm. A use case to be successful, the measure of success is how well does it fit in my processes? How well does it fit in my fit kind of like working with the people? And then what is the value it delivers? So it's not about is the accuracy 98 or 88 or 85%, but for instance, much more important, okay, do my people know how to use it? What is the feedback that the people say? Do they say that has actually a tangible impact? Because this is completely different. So, and this is what you try to do with the design phase. Kind of like what we often do is kind of like paper prototyping those use cases and really understanding what it takes kind of like along this whole machine learning life cycle. And then once we have a good understanding, we can think about, well, is this a use case that we maybe find in the market that we can buy from the market and maybe customize to our needs or just kind of like buy available? Or is this a use case that we need to make ourselves? Because there's no solution out there, or because we think we can do it better than everyone else, and there's a big competitive advantage in actually doing so. This would be probably, if we go now more into detail into this would be probably going far over what we want to do today. And then once you know what you want to do, and if you buy something or make something, then you have to put it into operations. And this is very much, again, a change management topic, kind of like thinking about how to introduce a new tool. How do you want to roll it out? How do you need to communicate this new tool? How do you need to train the people? And then the last point, how do you manage it? And often we see we have now much more product managers. There's going to be a slight different for management, whether you are kind of like buying something or building something. And a lot of what comes from the management or is on top of the management is now required by the AI Act. So very similar kind of like to medical devices that you kind of like need to monitor them. You need to have kind of like places where people can, or users or affected people by the solution can get feedback. And again, so this kind of like lets us look at the AI use case. And again, remember, it's not one individual use case, but it's actually how good are you getting at doing this over the scale of all use cases along your organization. And the idea is that your organization somewhere starts at the beginning from not started, or kind of like is very much at the beginning. And then it progresses. What you see often in the market, people talking about different AI maturity levels. And what we see, the more organizations, the more mature they get, the more value they tend to get out of artificial intelligence. And in order to reach these higher maturities, it's not only important kind of like use cases, and as you reach higher maturity levels, obviously the scale or the number of use cases that you have along your value chain is going to increase. And there you need to have good kind of like management practices and also developing practices in place to allow this, to allow kind of like the management over in place. But it's mainly going to be kind of like this transformation topic. So what I want to do now is kind of like look a little bit at the various enabling factors. So, and first of all, it's obviously we have a technological part. So we're looking here at the kind of like AI IT infrastructure. So kind of like the infrastructure that allows me to do artificial intelligence. So I need to have an understanding what is the existing infrastructure. Often companies come with their legacy systems that are very hard to maintain. And what you're seeing now, that kind of like these new companies that are coming out don't have kind of like these big monolith structures, but go more towards kind of like these microservices that are connected with APIs. So it's much easier and faster to maintain these IT infrastructures. And also, this is something you want to have, because as you have more AI solutions, you don't want them to be as individual kind of like lighthouse solutions, but at some point you want them to communicate with each other. And for this, you need to understand what is kind of like the right IT infrastructure that can support you in doing this. Also, and this really depends on the size of an organization, you have to think about, well, what is my cloud strategy? Do I have compute in-house? Do I use cloud? But also, what is the tool chain that I need, kind of like the AI IT tool chain that I need along the machine learning lifecycle in order to do successfully AI, in order to allow my people to successfully do AI. And then obviously a big part of it as well is data. I mean, data, people tell all the time, data is one of the most important resources. And thinking about how you can integrate data into, or not data, but how to set up a data strategy, kind of like data governance, and kind of like data literacy to make sure that data is not only available that you can use to get insights and build new AI tools on, but also available in the right quality. Because when you think about kind of like developing those use cases, the part where people spend most time on is actually getting the data and cleaning the data. So if you want to become much more towards an AI first organization, working on the data and having a good data governance in place
Oi,
will
Dan,
speed up the whole production that you
tudo bom
have
e você?
over all the whole situation. So I think there's someone not muted. Maybe you can mute yourself if you're not talking.
Tô ouvindo, Dan?
Jonathan, I think you are muted. Can you, Laura, can you maybe mute him? I can't do this as I'm not a host. And then if we go over to the next one, to kind of like the people. So at the end of the day, what you're going to see, I would say almost 70% of the things that you're dealing with are kind of like people topics. On the one hand side is the talent and expertise. So you need to understand who are the people that not only build AI in your organization, or implement kind of like AI solutions, but who are the people who drive kind of like this whole AI initiatives, the whole AI strategy that you're going to develop, who are going to drive this in the organization, and thinking about how do you get them, and the understanding that these are not only technical roles but a lot of non-technical roles, especially now with kind of like the AI Act going more into place, into phases. It's very important to have the right people that can make sure AI is deployed, is used, is applied in the organization at scale responsibly. And then the next thing is culture. I mean, having a culture where people support AI, this is actually when I'm going to the big DAX organizations, one of the biggest challenges, because there are still a lot of stigma around AI. Ooh, new technology, is it going to replace myself? Especially kind of like what we have or what we hear from media, from Hollywood. There's a lot of fear, but also kind of like a lot of news outlets saying all the time, well, for instance, radiology is going to be obsolete because of AI, or are we going to be replaced? And I think it's very important to understand that AI is not going to replace people, but people that know how to use AI are going to replace people who don't know how to use AI. And thinking about this, I mean, thinking about how can you support your workforce to become AI savvy? Because, and this is something you have to do, it's not only mandated by the AI Act, and Article number 4, kind of like this idea of AI literacy and how can I empower my workforce. And this is actually one of the first articles that is going to go into place in February. But also think about the risk and challenges and also productivity loss if you don't do it. Because what we're seeing now is we have kind of like this rise of shadow AI, that kind of like, if I don't have clear guidelines in my organization how to use AI, people will still use artificial intelligence. They will just bring their own tools. I have seen it quite often if I go to workshops and they say, okay, well, we can't take our corporate computers because we're not allowed to use ChatGPT, but we're bringing out our personal computers. And then we send back and forth emails. And just think about the risk that this can create. So you need to have kind of like specific kind of like strategies and kind of like things or roadmap, how you empower your people and how you can work with this. Then the next phase is kind of like, or the next step is kind of like this organizational ecosystem. And here I'm talking a little bit about two things. So on the one hand side, inside the organization. So how is the team, the hierarchy, the organigram looking like that is doing artificial intelligence? Because they have to work quite often across the whole divisions. And thinking about how do they get support, for instance, by the C-level, so they can kind of like efficiently break up silos and push the AI strategy forward. And then also not only internally, but also externally. So what partnerships do I need? So we see kind of like the field of AI is moving very, very fast, very, very quickly, and you can't handle it on your own. And even the big players, even the hyperscalers, even someone like Google or Microsoft, they are not working without partnerships. Just think about the partnership between Microsoft and OpenAI, or think about the partnership, or not the partnership anymore. Google decided very early on to acquire DeepMind, for instance. So just thinking about, okay, what are the partners that I want to play with and here, or that I need and where I need to support. And then what often helps, what I do is kind of like these ecosystem mappings, looking at different partnerships, looking at what you can get out of them, expertise, training, workshops, talent, innovation, and so on. And then thinking about, okay, well, how do I want to work with them? Is it a purely transactional activity that I'm doing? Or is this more a strategic partnership where we have more kind of like a similar outlook of footing in the future? And it's super interesting kind of like to understand or look at kind of like the whole market through what partnerships and how are people working with external people. Quite often, I mean, people, this is why we have the AI Strategy Institute, they really are open to kind of like get help and support, because sometimes they don't know how to start or they don't have those trainings available. So why don't get them from outside? And then the last part is kind of like the governance part. So here, on the one hand side, it contains ethics, so what you should do, and then obviously what you need to do. So the compliance and regulations, with things now coming up, such the AI Act, but also other legislations such as GDPR, such as Urheberrecht. In English, it's kind of like ownership of these models. These are kind of like all questions that you have to deal with, that you have to prepare for. Otherwise, kind of like hefty fines can be imposed upon you if you don't kind of like play the regulation game. But there's also more to it. It's kind of like the ethics part to it. There are things that are not necessarily set down by regulations. These can be things like, okay, should I use AI to actually get rid of my employees and be more productive? Or is my strategy to say, okay, well, we don't want to use AI to get rid of employees, but we want them to support our employees, because what we're seeing is we have an aging workforce, and in the next couple of years, we don't know how we can kind of like get the new talent. Also, we have a talent shortage, so we need to understand how we can impose artificial intelligence, and this will have a very kind of like big impacts on the strategy. But also, what I see a lot in kind of like the governance or the ethics part is we have to understand kind of like the new threats that are coming with artificial intelligence, be it kind of like what we're seeing now, AI or deepfakes being used as more threat to society and democracy in a year where we have all these elections, and you probably have seen how AI is used to try to manipulate people, but also on a lower level. I mean, we are seeing now a rise of AI scams, kind of like security threats. I think at the beginning of the year, I read the news of, I think it was in the UK, where deepfake has been used to kind of like pretend to be the CFO of a company, and they were able to get 25 million out of there, or scam 25 million out of the company. And we have to think about how you can prepare for this, how you can sensibilize your workforce. And then all of this, for me, really kind of like makes or are the factors, the enabling factors that we have to look at, kind of like to understand how a holistic AI strategy looks like. And then we have to think about, okay, well, what are the steps? What are the roadmaps that I want to do? What are the specific things? What are the KPIs? How do I measure them? And make sure that I'm on track to achieve where I want to be, kind of like this AI-enabled organization. And then let's go to the Q&A in a second. But this is exactly what kind of like we want to do. Is we, as the AI Strategy Institute, our mission is really to empower these individuals, but our organizations, to become responsible leaders, drive innovation, and create sustainable value in the world of AI. So we work as kind of like a mixture of think tank, but also consultancy and academy. And what we have done now is kind of like we launched our very first product, or academy training, where we want to empower those people and give them kind of like the hands-on skills to become these managers of change in an AI-driven world. So we will give you kind of like the skills that you need, not only to understand AI and understand also generative AI and some tools that will help you to boost your own productivity, but to think about AI in a much bigger organizational setting. So not only kind of what we talked now about an AI strategy, but also what are steps and what could be a roadmap of an AI strategy, how to find those use cases, how to evaluate them, then also kind of like how to think about implementing them along kind of like the whole value chain. But then also what we're trying to do is to kind of like preview for what is coming now with the AI Act and make sure that everything is happening is aligned with kind of like the idea of trustworthy AI as you can find it in the AI Act. And this is going to be also a requirement of the AI Act when in February, Article 4, AI literacy is going to get into place. So this is really what we want to do. And if you're interested in joining, I think we have really, really cool offerings. We have, so normally when I do the presentations right now, it's a little bit of a different setting. It's a little bit more interactive and not just me talking, and also kind of like a little bit more mixture in slides. So if you're interested, just kind of like feel free to join and support us. And this was a little bit about my monologue on AI strategy. And maybe you might have some questions, and then we can open a little bit more up for the plenum. But let me stop sharing so I can see now everyone again.
Yes. Thank you, Tristan. Lots of information, very interesting. And I think it was very clear to see what kind of opportunities organizations can have by using AI. And also what they're kind of missing out if they don't do it, right? Especially if we look further the next 5 years or even 10 years. So it's just at some point, it's going to be a very decisive competitive factor for probably every company. Would you say that this kind of AI strategy is important for every organization, or could every organization use this framework, this kind of like how to do it way?
Yes, but I think it needs to be very much adapted for the organization. I mean, this what I'm talking kind of like if you really do it this deep and holistic, this is kind of like this is normally very important for the big organizations. If you are a smaller SME, you don't have to go very deep in setting up like the super structured AI strategy. But kind of like what I always emphasize is, well, get started, get the first learnings. And we often help them with kind of like really get on the ground, get started, and get the first learnings. And what I see kind of like if I would kind of like boil down what I said, kind of like how we can think about AI strategy and what you should do with AI, it boils down to three things. So the first thing would be elevate. Try to think about how you can use AI to elevate your workforce with tools like we have seen this with ChatGPT, but thinking about how you can do this responsibly so you don't have a rise of shadow AI, but you give your employees the tools and you train them on using the tools so you can boost overall productivity. And in some kind of like sections of an organization, this will have already massive impact. So if you're talking, for instance, about marketing, I've seen a couple of marketing divisions in organization that have fully embraced generative AI and kind of like this image generation capabilities. And they have, I mean, they have speed up their development process of kind of like generating new outcome or new merchandising in what cost them. You just think about it. They had to do a photo shoot, they had to organize the photo shoot, they had to pay the people for the photo shoot. This takes a couple of weeks, it takes a lot of money. And now suddenly, hey, within a couple of minutes, they can generate something they couldn't ever do before. And you see kind of like how already kind of like just using tools available from the market without high cost, you can elevate your workforce. The second thing is if you go much more into the processes and try to understand the processes, here it's automate. Thinking about how you can use AI or other things to automate a lot of the processes where they make sense to automate, right? So where it really kind of like makes sense. And this is also kind of like can happen very, very low cost without being expensive. And then the last step I would normally say is innovate. So thinking about how you can use AI to really drive innovation, to innovate processes that you might have, to completely change them, but also maybe to bring out new products. And yeah, especially if you're getting started and if you're a smaller company, you don't need these big teams. You don't necessarily need to kind of like have data scientists that build you the stuff, but you can use kind of like what you find on the market. And with this, kind of like with the software that is available, you can already do amazing stuff. I mean, I have spoken to companies or other experts in the field that help organizations very, very fast, kind of like to implement 4, 5, 6, 7 right tools to really kind of like boost productivity, to generate more revenue and so on. And I think especially for the smaller ones, this is where they should start on, because why don't first start in trying things out, get your first learnings, and then really have a better understanding, and only then to kind of like really tackle it much more on a bigger level or a bigger scale when you really see the value out of it. And if your decision is, okay, well, we think that with AI we can get, I don't know, somewhere we couldn't get otherwise. So because at the end of the day, AI is a tool and should support your overall business goals.
And if you're saying, just start basically and get into it, is there an advice you would give to someone who is an employee at a company who says, okay, I'm interested in and I want to see what kind of skills I should develop for myself even so that I stay relevant, and to educate myself. Could you elaborate a little bit on these two sides? What should someone who's an employee in an organization do, or what could they do? Where should they start? And what should a C-level do, for example, a decision maker, right?
Yeah, so I see this quite often. People ask me quite often, so where should I start, and how do I get this expertise to drive this? And there, I would say kind of like there are three different types of AI expertise. The first type of AI expertise is kind of like the technological skills. So you know how to build AI, and there are also kind of like different skills. So there's a difference between building, for instance, these deep language models that we are seeing with people who have PhD in mathematics and so on, versus people that apply those existing tools to build really kind of like cool applications, cool solutions. So for instance, hey, I use an API of GPT-4 and can build a nice chatbot. Completely different skills, but both like in the technical range. And a lot of people traditionally, they think, okay, well, if I want to understand AI, I need to go down the technical route. And there are a lot of courses available on there. And I see a lot of management people or people from non-technical backgrounds, they say, okay, well, I'm very interested in this topic. So, and what they think is, okay, well, what I need to do now is I need to work on my technical skills. This is the wrong approach. And I tell you in a second why. I mean, if you want to do this, you can do this. There's, I don't know, millions courses out there, free resources available everywhere, where you can find those things. The second thing is, well, you can be kind of like an expert on a tool level. So you understand very well how to be a prompt engineer, how to use, for instance, ChatGPT, how to use Midjourney and so on, generate a lot of stuff. But then you are an expert on a tool level. It's similar to being kind of like an expert on kind of like Excel, right? So if I'm very good at Excel, power user at Excel, I can do amazing things with Excel. It's a similar thing with kind of like this tool and the whole range of tools. And there are also a lot of people out there that's selling you kind of like courses, or they're selling you, these are the 5 ChatGPT prompts. Challenge in there is, well, it needs to be somehow aligned kind of like to the whole business, and you really kind of like need to understand a little bit kind of like where you're trying to go and where you're doing. And also the challenge is the field is moving so fast, so it feels like every 3 months you need a new training to just keep up with the pace of these tools. And there's the third level, and this is what we're doing, or also I have been always doing with the teaching, is the management level of AI, giving people the skills to understand how to manage AI. And you find almost no courses on there. And this is why we kind of like went into this. And this was back then how my course at the Technical University started. So back then I was kind of like, I looked at the course offerings of the Technical University of Munich and said, oh, well, all the courses that you have is courses on how to kind of like how to build AI, right? And I always said, well, this would be the same as if I would teach people how to build an engine of a car, and then they have to go in the economy and have to know how to develop mobility concepts, how to drive a car, and how to kind of like run organizations or build up new organizations in the car industry. I mean, it might help that you know how to build an engine of a car, but these are not the skills to be successful in the real economy. And this is kind of like how I started with the course that I had, or I started at TUM, and it was called AI for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. With 40 students, we started, and then suddenly, like a lot of people said, "Wow, this is one of the best courses, super hands-on, very fun." I'm a big fan of edutainment and kind of like letting my people not only as I'm doing now, me talking, and I know how to talk and talk a lot is a challenge, but I'm a fan of learning by doing. So a lot of exercises, getting to them to have their own aha moments and learning experiences. And then the next year afterwards, I didn't have kind of like 40 students, I had over 1,000 students, and everyone said, well, if you're going to have a course this big, the teaching or education experience is going to be shit. Especially in the big rooms, you can't cater to people. And I said, well, I don't think so. I prove you wrong. And I had a course with 1,000 people, and then everyone said, okay, well, this is the course, how it should be. I want to kind of like, you inspired me to have a career in artificial intelligence. And this is kind of like what, I mean, we with the AI Strategy Institute also want to bring to you, kind of like having this management experience. And the nice thing about this management part is that is kind of like you're gonna see kind of like the frameworks you get when you're talking about management. They are not changing. So the technology is changing all the time, but you will learn the frameworks how to kind of like understand the change and then also how to manage the change. And this is what I like, this is what I see is missing in the market. And this is what I'm standing for. And I want to give to people and kind of like so they have a better understanding on how to be these drivers in those organizations. And I think these people are crucial and super important because these are the ones responsible for your organization is going to be succeeding in a world where AI is taking a bigger and bigger and bigger role. And not only this, I mean, you see people that are actively investing in their AI skills. Not only we said before, AI is not going to replace people, but people that know how to AI how to do AI are going to replace people that not how to do AI. You can actually see it in their salary. There are studies out there, for instance, last year, the study done by Oxford that says people with AI skills, and depending on how you combine those AI skills, can see salary increases of up to 40%. And I want to enable those people. I want to really enable those people to become leaders, stewards of AI in kind of like this very challenging world that we have at the moment.
Yeah. Thanks. We also got a feedback from Anna. Thank you for that, and we will definitely further develop this kind of meetings. Is there any questions that someone has? Feel free to just unmute, ask your question, or type it in the chat, whatever you prefer. Yeah. Be happy for any question.
I think one thing that you mentioned, Tristan, earlier was the fact that you've worked with in the military sector as well. Just on a personal note, I'd like to understand, have you worked with red teaming by any chance with any of the governments before?
Sorry, can you, that was
Have you worked on any red teaming projects with any of the militaries?
No, so the thing that I did was basically was a lot of upskilling. So I didn't work kind of like hands-on on strategies, but like empowering them on kind of like so with the innovation team, I did this to understand how they can kind of like be empowered to make smart choices when to find new innovation, when to contract new innovation with artificial intelligence. And what we did is kind of like we had, I think, a 3-day workshop. It was super fun. And we kind of like I developed like big canvases that they kind of like have been using. And then I think one of the coolest experiences, I think this was last year, I was invited to the Munich Security Conference, and there was one person, or there were a couple of persons from the workshop, and one person I didn't know, and he was like, yeah, okay, you're Tristan. And he was like, you're Tristan. I remember you. I haven't been into your workshop, but we're still using the canvases in the organization. So this is where I have your name. And this is also what we want to give to you, kind of like these canvases, these frameworks, these tools. But unfortunately, I haven't been working on a red teaming or something. It was very much on kind of like strategic upskilling.
Nice stuff.
So, any other questions? If not, then I mean, thank you so much. That was amazing. It was our first LinkedIn Live session, so to say. I think we learned a lot. We still have to learn a little bit more on how to on the management side, but it was so great to see you guys here and hopefully, I mean, we just started. It would be amazing if you can support us in our journey. Spread the word. If you know any people or anyone who would be interested or profiting from kind of like this AI strategy fundamentals program, please send them towards our way. I mean, I think we have a very, very, very fair value and pricing to it. I mean, this is where I'm coming from. I'm coming from academia. I think education should be accessible, and you can see this in the offerings that we have. That we really want to help people to become stewards in AI. And it would immensely help us if you can spread the word. We truly believe. I mean, I've been working in this field for a very long time in the educational field. That the things that we're offering are really, really good, and really top notch. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and hope to see you maybe in the program or at any other occasion. So have a great day and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you,
Everyone.
Tristan. See you
Bye
soon.
bye.
Yo,
Bye.
bye.
Bye.